It's time for this week's parting shots.
The NFL added to the Rooney Rule this week, mandating multiple external non-white candidates be interviewed for head coaching positions and at least one external minority candidate for coordinator and senior operations positions. We'll see if this helps the league's dismal diversity hiring record, but I doubt it. It's important to remember that the problem isn't the Rooney Rule. The problem is the problem. The rule, enacted in 2003, was once a promising solution. There were 2 minority head coaches then, and there had only been 6 in the modern era of the NFL. But in 2006 and 2007, there were 7 minority head coaches. Now, there's 4. Mike Tomlin and Ron Rivera are the only 2 minority coaches hired since 2007 with tenures longer than 4 seasons. As for the front office, there are 2 general managers of color, down from 6 in 2017. The problem is racism. When the white guys keep hiring each other, ignoring everyone else for decades, there's no other word. Why else would teams so brazenly flout the rule, using countless end arounds to undercut its spirit? Improving hiring practices would help no one more than the owners. They reap the greatest benefits from success. The chances of competence in winning greatly improve when you give yourself more opportunities to hire the right leaders. But instead, they've hurt themselves and others by conducting sham interviews and using internal candidates just to check boxes. The problem is the problem. It's the owners who need to be better, but they won't do so on their own. Now, why are we so comfortable with that? The answer to that might be a problem, too.
Earlier this week, the NFL announced an expansion of the Rooney Rule, requiring teams to interview 2 non-white candidates for head coaching jobs, as well as 1 for coordinator and GM positions. This news comes after just 3 of the last 20 head coaches hired were not white. Now, it caused far less backlash than another proposal that would have given teams draft picks for hiring minority candidates, which prompted many to argue that such incentives would be demeaning. While I have doubts that the draft pick idea would even work, what's far more demeaning in my mind is a process where coaches are sitting through sham interviews when teams have already decided what they're going to do. It's demeaning to be told, sorry, we wanted a quarterback guy, only to have the goalpost moved every year. It's demeaning to chase a dream that's quite possibly an illusion. That doesn't mean more interviews are bad, I just think they're far from enough, especially when the people doing the interviewing are almost exclusively white and work for teams whose owners are almost exclusively white as well. That can and should change. But before it does, the league should not only expand access and opportunity, but ensure that those opportunities are real. There needs to be accountability with people tasked with ensuring the process is legit and that these efforts are being made in good faith. Because at the end of the day, there will always be people who argue wrongly that we've already got a meritocracy and that any intervention is demeaning. But the only entity that's truly demeaned by the lack of progress here is the NFL itself.
Banning spitting in baseball is about as easy as banning blinking. But due to this droplet-borne pandemic thing, MLB is gonna try. The league is outlawing saliva and sunflower seeds and chewing tobacco, which is all so off-brand, I would argue, for a cultural reason. Baseball is cowboy cosplay. Think about it. Name another sport where you stare at people from underneath a hat while wearing flannels and a belt and stirrups. Name another sport where you're touching this much leather, this much horsehide. No other game can claim an iron horse and Wade Boggs on a horse and cowboy up, let alone the singing, bleeping cowboy himself. And like Giannotti, every single baseball game takes a break from doing cowboy stuff to sing. Baseball has bullpens and farmhands and duels. There are obviously insane mustaches and meaningful whistles and unwritten honor codes. And while all of that happens, everybody spits. From the fans up in the bleachers down to Cowboy Joe West behind home. The ballpark was America's most famous spittoon for a century, but now, wisely, no longer. That change will be hard to swallow.
If it's allowed, I'd like to focus on something positive for a moment. At least the potential of something positive. And that's the NBA reportedly considering Walt Disney World in Orlando as a frontrunner to host the remainder of the NBA season. Why Disney? It seems the best equipped site to house hundreds of NBA players, personnel, and media, with enough court options already in place and more easily added. For those unaware, Walt Disney World is temporarily closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that currently unused land is roughly the size of San Francisco. It's not a small world after all. If you can allow yourself to assume all involved parties receive proper testing and the league creates a feasible protocol for said resumption, then what an oddly magical moment in sports this could be. And I promise I'm not just saying that because Disney is ESPN's parent company. It would be the most star-studded AAU camp of all time, happening on the happiest place on earth. You want to question the outcome that comes out of this scenario? Why? Other than the large inconvenience of being secluded, the competitive elements don't ruin anything. These teams would come in well-rested, and games played on neutral sites with no fan interaction. The team that withstands these pared-down elements best will forever be able to tell the tale of the strangest championship ever won. But its legitimacy shouldn't be questioned. Could players and personnel be trusted to stay within the Disney boundaries? In these rare times, I'm convinced the team-first attitude will take over, and guys will stay in place. After all, not every team has to stay for the duration. The roller coaster of an NBA playoffs in the shadow of Space Mountain? Yes, please.
Look, I'm sure Miami Dolphins fans are very excited. They have every right to be. Tua Tagovailoa is an awesome talent, one of the most dynamic, accomplished, pressure-tested college football players since Rutgers polished off Princeton in 1869. But here's one piece of advice for Dolphins fans, and for Tua too. Underestimate Ryan Fitzpatrick at your peril. Yeah, that's right, Ryan Fitzpatrick. Everybody talks about Tom Brady, 199th pick, 6th round. Sure, great career, no denying it. But how about Fitzpatrick, 250th pick, 7th round? Out of Harvard. 15 years later, he's still slinging it in the NFL. 139 starts for 8 different franchises. Top 40 all-time in completions, yards, and touchdowns. Admit it, the Amish Rifle's career has been stellar. But you could hear snickering in some quarters when he spoke up for himself this week and said, hey, Tua might just have to wait. He's got to beat out the beard to start. And what a glorious beard it is. I mean, wow. No one ever thinks Fitzpatrick is going to be their quarterback, and then he is. The league's littered with the remains of those who were expected to beat out Fitzpatrick. He's the Rasputin of quarterbacks. Tua's great, but don't kid yourself. In this showdown between Crimson Tide and Crimson, nothing has yet been settled. And it is always dangerous to bet against Fitzmagic.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.